Here in America, there were arguments back in the day between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. While Martin Luther King was advocating for non-violence, and Malcolm X was saying that it is immoral and indeed criminal to tell people not to fight back. When a murderer comes to your house, you're not going to sweet talk them away. And yes, reading the history of the great Nelson Mandela, he taught us that non-violence works when the oppressor has a conscience. But when the oppressor has no conscience, non-violence doesn't work. I mean, we have protested and they've massacred people, young people, babies, Gen Zs in Kenya and Tanzania came to protest non-violently on the street and they were mowed down. Painfully, the international community, the supposedly moral world, the free world, looked on, and before long they were pouring billions in Tanzania like they do in Uganda and other countries. Therefore, what other strategy? There's what is ideal and there's what is real. The ideal is non-violence. The real is violence. However, I'm persuaded that the ideal can actually be real. Non-violence can work. How does it work? These dictators would not be able to mow people down if they did not have a wind beneath their wings. For example, if America said you cannot kill people, those people will not be killed. Especially in countries that depend on America and Europe. Well, maybe in China, Iran and other countries, it can stand. I was at a conference with a brother from China and he was asking for my advice. Says, I come from China and this and that. What do you advise me? Because I'm an advocate for democracy, I'm an activist, defending human rights and democracy in China, but now I have to end up running to exile. What do you advise me? I'm like, what do I advise this guy? I honestly told him, bro, you have a big problem. Because for me, my dictator is funded by the West. And if I can either provoke the conscience of the West to stop funding them, I will be home and dry. But your oppressor is rich and does not need any funding from the US. So I don't know what to do for you. Same way, in Uganda, and by extension in Africa, if the international community said we are not going to relate with you when you're killing your own people, when you're murdering your own people, non-violence will work. But for as long as the international community is complacent and is going to look the other side when people are being killed, then there's a big question on non-violence. Unfortunately, they are the same that are very quick, very, very quick to sanction the people that are trying to free themselves by any means necessary. So that's the challenge. That's the more reason why we continuously come to the West and ask them to evoke the moral tools that they have, the targeted sanctions against gross human rights violators. Recently I saw them sanction the former president of Congo. But there is a sitting president in Uganda and a military commander that commits this crime in real time and is not shy, is not even pretending to hide them. Then why not sanction them? When we get that, then non-violence works. And maybe I'll say that once we free Uganda, it will not only be freedom for Uganda, but it will become a base for all other freedom fighters. to base there and free their countries. We don't have so many countries as of now. That's why I want to give a base. And maybe when you free Belarus before we free Uganda, hopefully we can make it a base to free Uganda as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent response, and I'll get to your question just there. But before I do, I want to just say, there's a really wonderful text that I encourage you all to read from the 16th century by this Frenchman called The Discourse on Voluntary Servitude. It was written almost 600 years ago, and he basically asked the question, how is it that millions of people can submit to one man? Which is, I think, the question that you've just been asked, right? And what he says is basically it takes 6 people in his inner circle who flatter him, who take care of his his most intimate needs. 60 people who go around and administer his decisions. These would be like the MPs, right?
Yeah.
600 people who then go around and basically do the work on the ground to make sure everyone obeys. These would be like your LCs, right? And then 6,000 other people who depend on those 666 people.
Yeah.
So people who take bribes, who are part of the system. But that's really all it takes to make a whole millions of people, an entire country of France, submit to one tyrant. And he already came up with that idea 600 years ago. So we know what it takes, and we also, I think, know what it takes to remove that. Anyway.
Hello, my name is JC. I'm originally from Cameroon and the Republic of Congo. Sorry.
You come from 2 countries. You say you come from Cameroon and the Republic of Congo.
I was raised in France.
Oh.
So the current topic that's been going around is violence, right? So how do you plan, and you're trying to become the leader of an institution, namely the state, which at its origin is basically the organization of mass exploitation, right? Every state that I know of today, there's no state that I can think of which wasn't born in violence, right? Its true fundamental purpose seems to be the appropriation of people's labor, right? So how do you plan on educating the population about the true nature of the state from a sociological perspective, while also fighting, on the other hand, small, very organized groups, which happen to be militarized as well, and which are trying to maintain the status quo and the exploitation of mankind?
Please ask the question again. Sorry.
I'm trying to make it as easy as possible, but from my own observations, right, what we call the states, whether that's the United States, Uganda, Cameroon, France, you name it, they have this one thing in common, which is violence, right? All of those states were created with extreme violence. If you think about how the United States was born, right? Uganda is the same through the colonization of the British Empire. And it seems to me that the fundamental, the true nature of the system is the organization of the political means. And I'm using the terms of the German economist, Franz Oppenheimer, who differentiated basically 2 ways of exchanging, right? The economic means, which is the voluntary exchange of goods and services, right? Let's say we want to exchange something, which would be very peaceful. And there's also the political means, what he calls the political means, which is the appropriation, the forcible appropriation of other people's labor, right? So you're trying to become the leader of that institution that we call the state, which purpose is the preservation of the status quo, right? So you find yourself basically sitting between 2 chairs, where on the one hand, I wouldn't say you must serve the interests of what I would call the elites, and at the same time you have to serve the population, right? So how do you educate people about the true nature of the state? That it may not be what we believe it to be, right? That the institutions that constitute the state are, as a matter of fact, in place to perpetuate, imperialism, right? We see it in the United States with external wars, right? Which don't have any reason to be, other than the expropriation and the desire to make more money, to control more resources, right? So I know it's a bit complex, but how do you plan on educating the population about the true nature of the state?
How do I plan to educate?
Right.
Oh, how?
Knowing that this goes against let's say, I would say those elite groups, right, which goal is to appropriate more resources.
Well, I don't know if I get you right, but you seem to say that violence is there and is part of the state, right? And how do I intend to educate people about violence, to accept violence the way it is?
Not to accept violence, but to educate people about the fact that the state, as it is, maybe not the institution that we believe it is, right? That its genesis is within extreme violence, whether you talk about colonialism, right, which happened in very cruel ways, cutting gangs in the Congo, you know, and there are so many different examples. In the United States of America, where we bring millions of slaves from Africa, you know, compromise the native populations that were here before Europeans arrived, right? So the true nature of the state, like I'm saying, is rooted in violence, right? How do you educate people about maybe finding a solution which lies outside of the traditional solutions that the state would propose?
Thank you. If I get you right, first you seem to suggest that violence is part of us and is intertwined with the state, which I disagree with. What I believe in is, yes, violence is there, but it must be tamed. Must be tamed by the people and owned. There's no country that is more violent than America. But America, the violence is tamed. It is the people over the violence. And for that violence to happen, at least in my opinion, I could be wrong, and that violence is not supposed to be against the people, but the people are supposed to control it and decide. For example, one writer wrote that the role of the military is to protect their people. And if the army is to protect the people against their enemies or the enemies of the state. And if their army is against the people, then the people are the enemies of the state. So, in the case of Uganda, we want to tame that violence and be able to direct it where it benefits the people, namely against the enemies of the people, not against the people. And when we tame that, then the people will determine what kind of state they want, not what kind of state an individual wants. As of now, violence, we are subjugated by violence. We are not above it. We don't direct it against the enemies of Uganda because we are reduced to being the enemies of Uganda. It should be in control of the people. The police is violent, but that violence is supposed to be against crime, not to control the people and to control their thinking and to control their choices. So our ultimate goal in simple terms is to subjugate violence, is to subdue the guns, to make the guns subjects of the people and not the other way around. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'll take one last question. And then
Thank you. I was just going to ask, you had mentioned your sentiment about the Belarus and free Uganda. What would a free Uganda look like to you? And what would be the first policy you would implement as the president?
Thank you. For me, a free Uganda is where everyone is equal, regardless of tribe, status, gender, or economic status, where all Ugandans have the right to live to their full potential, where the wealth of the country serves for the benefit of everybody, where the rule of law prevails, where leaders are servants and the people are the true masters, where leaders govern in accordance to the law but for the benefit of the people. And the first step to do is to re-empower the three arms of government, to have an independent judiciary, to have an independent legislature, and to make sure that they are able to check the executive. It's to make sure that the military does its noble duty of guarding our borders, and the police is there to protect people and their property and not to play politics. It's basically to free up people where citizens are not going to have to worry about offending those in power. That's the new Uganda that I envision. A Uganda where everybody from north to south, from east to west, can dream to become something and they'll be it. That's the Uganda I envision. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent note for us to end our discussion.
Thank you. Thank you to the both of you. This was something for all of us to return to, and that's my ask, and also the space that I think we all are here to see what it is that we can take from this and actually take action on, right? Many of us come to these conversations, these talks, and we're left feeling good, or maybe not, but nonetheless, it may fall flat. So my challenge to you is to think about ways in which to connect to your communities, to connect to your colleagues, to connect to other students, and actually enact what could actually change and move the barometer into places and spaces that which support the visions that you all have for the world, not just what we heard here today. And I asked you a question in the beginning: what is the cost of being a public voice? And that cost, where does it land in your body? I'm asking for you to live in that question as you even move into the next part of your day. Here in narrative medicine, in the space of deeply listening, asking those questions that really allow for us to deeply listen to the other, not just yourself, and also to be able to listen around the nuance of storytelling is the challenge I think we all have in society right now, is to deeply listen to one another. And I want to say thank you to you both, and from bottom line, thank you so much, Mr. President, for being here, okay?
Thank you very much to our speakers and Bobby for being here today. And I also want to encourage all of you to stay in touch with the Institute of African Studies. This is something that we are trying to do to bring people together under Africa House, to have these types of conversations. So please, if you're back next term, please join us. Come meet with us in Locks Hall. We're just down here at the end of this hallway here. So come visit and be part of the community. So thank you all for coming.